Welcome to episode 475 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer and director Corey Deshon. He has a great story. He was just a kid with a dream when he moved to Hollywood and just started networking, getting low-level jobs in the industry, worked his way up and started writing in television, and now he has a new feature film out called Daughter, starring Casper Van Dien. So stay tuned for that interview. SYS's six-figure screenplay contest is open for submissions. Just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. Our early bird deadline is March 31st, but if your script is ready, definitely submit now to save some money. We're looking for low-budget shorts and features, and we're defining low budget as less than six figures, in other words, less than $1 million US. We've got lots of industry judges reading the scripts in the later rounds. We're giving away thousands in cash and prizes. I had the winner from 2020, Richard Pierce, on the podcast in episode 378. He won the contest and was introduced to one of our industry judges, Ted Campbell, who took the script to Mar Vista Entertainment and got the film produced. And we've had a number of other scripts optioned from the contest as well. So it feels like we're getting some good traction. We do have a short film script category, 30 pages or less. If you have a low budget short script, by all means submit that as well. Once again, if you want to submit to the contest or learn more about it or check out some of our industry judges, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 475. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I teach you how to write a professional logline inquiry letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing screenwriter and director Corey Deshon. Here is the interview. Welcome, Corey, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, sure. So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Yeah, so I grew up in Tampa, Florida, under the impression that there really was no path between Tampa and Hollywood. So I was there, they were here, and that was it. I was not pursuing being a filmmaker as a career, really. I grew up as a musician, played a lot of instruments, piano, drum, saxophone. I would write and compose. Then I got into creative writing. I used to do stuff like that, painting, photography, drawing, always into art in general as just something that I would do because I enjoyed it. But it wasn't really until later in life, the idea of actually becoming a filmmaker professionally struck me. It was just the interest that I always had. I grew up loving movies, wanting to write. But any idea of making a film would be just something I went out and did in my backyard, not really in pursuit of a career. When I got to high school, I started studying computer technology. Started to work in that field immediately after high school while I was in college. I got my degree in IT, and after 9 years of study between high school and college, 5 years of working in the field, that's when it hit me. Maybe now's the time I should just try to do this filmmaking thing, just that backyard version of it. And I took some time off work after getting my degree and raised some money on crowdfunding and hired some people off of Craigslist and set out to make this little short film. This is when I lived in Orlando, Florida. I just was going to UCF. And nobody will ever see that film, but the process of doing it, just the experience of like finally getting to say I'm on my own set, I'm directing actors, I wrote this, I'm producing it. That was the realization for me that this is what I was supposed to be doing for my entire life. And it was that culmination of all these other creative pursuits, even the music side of it. I wanted, if there would have been a version of me as a composer professionally, I would have been writing film for music or writing music for film. And it was at that moment that I realized I'm going to be miserable for the rest of my life if I don't go do this for real now, if I don't at least make the attempt to do it.
Hmm.
And this was October of 2012. I went right back into work, told my boss, look, I got to go. I got to move to LA. I got to live there before the end of the year. And so we'll take the next 2 months, train my replacement, but then it's time for me to go. And I didn't necessarily know what I was walking into. It was just that realization that I would rather fail at this, at trying to do what I love, than anything else, than to not
Hmm.
try.
So I'm curious, maybe you can just give us some quick tips. 2012, you're, I think, in a position with a lot of people that are interested in film. You go to college, you get a degree, maybe not in film, you're working. You sort of realize this at whatever, age 25, age 28, and you make that move. Did you save money? How much money did you save? Did you have friends in LA? How did you know where to start looking for apartments? Just give us a couple quick tips on sort of your transition from working in Florida in IT to trying to be an aspiring screenwriter in LA.
Yeah, totally. I mean, well, one of the most immediate things that I realized about the business when I got out here is that at the end of the day, the film industry is a privileged person's pastime. Like, it's not something you just come out and do without some kind of financial security, financial stability, whether you're coming from that or you're building it on your own. You have to have some kind of plan. And I had kind of a plan at the time, but what worked in my favor is that I wasn't coming out in debt already, that I'd gone to school on scholarships. I had been working in tech already. I had a salary. I had a little bit of money saved up to float myself for about 6 or 7 months until I was able to start working out here. Um, but that was the deciding factor. I could come out here and incur some living expense debt to make myself
Mm-hmm.
last because I wasn't bringing that burden with me already. And that's, a position that made this possible for me. That,
Mm-hmm.
and coming from a mother who was very supportive. We don't come from money. My mother's a public school social worker in Florida, but she believed in me in this and had my back. And there would be months where I would get help paying rent, or I'd be paying rent on a credit card or things like that, like just to last out here long enough,
Mm-hmm.
because it was production assistant work when I got out here. Something that I did to sort of orient myself was I took a producing program at UCLA. They have this graduate certificate program, that's just this 10-week intensive course. It's pricey. You gotta have some money coming out.
Mm-hmm.
But not too expensive in terms of like film school kind of thing. It's just one little course. But that gave me it gave me insight on how to orient myself here. It taught me a little bit about what the business was. I started to learn the basics of producing as a concept, like the physical, scheduling, budgeting, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Just have a little bit of a loose understanding about it, how sets worked, how studios worked, so that I can try to navigate finding jobs for myself. And then the benefit of being in LA kicked in, and that it became a networking game. And just from making friends in that class, I end up at some party in LA somewhere where I meet some other group of people and we become friends, and they invite me to some other party. And at this party, I meet a director who's about to make his first film at the time. And I said, hey, look, I just got out here. Can I come volunteer assist for you? And this was within the first 5 or 6 months of moving here, and that became my first like real on-set experience. Like, that was a set that I went
Mm-hmm.
on to and learned how to do the job of production assistant. And to them, it's like, free labor, sure, come on out. And for me, it's a free education. I show
Mm-hmm.
up, learn how to do the job, do it as good as I possibly can. I bust my ass on that set. And then suddenly the first AD is calling me back for other work. The line producer is calling me back for other work. That production designer called me for other work. The production coordinator called me for other work. And that's how it started, just expanding that
Mm-hmm.
network of being able to support myself as best as I could as a production assistant while I figured out how to navigate the creative side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go
So
ahead.
I'm curious. So you said you moved out in 2012. When did you make this short film that nobody's ever going to see? And I assume that's not To Police, the short film that's listed on things. And so so just bring us up from that moment where you made this short film in your backyard to making To Police. How much time and distance was in that? Was To Police in Los Angeles by this time?
Yeah, To Police, I want to say I shot in 2014 or 2015. And then yeah, that the other short was it was called Standing Up, which I filmed in Orlando in the summer or late fall of 2012. Yeah, that was October fall of 2012. And I came out here. The short was okay. There were some pieces of it that I didn't finish, just like scheduling stuff like that. One of the actors didn't show up on like the last day of shooting, like one of those types of things.
Uh,
I didn't have a completed piece of work. and I ended up cutting a little show reel out of it just to show that I could like competently compose a scene, that sort of thing. And that was it. But what it served for me was that that became the basis of a feature that I wrote. I rewrote the short script as a feature, and that was my one writing sample in that first year that I would just try to put in front of anybody that I could. And To Police came directly out of that. And even one degree of separation away from that first assistant job that I had. So
Hmm.
the production coordinator of that set invited me a couple months later to be an office intern, and then I became the office PA of a different production, slightly higher budget. I meet a production coordinator there who was going to be my direct boss. So on the first stage, you go through the basic, hi, how are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? That sort of thing. What brought you to LA? And I was never the type of person to say, I'm here to be the best production assistant I can be. I was like, no, I'm here to write and direct. I came here to be a filmmaker.
Hmm.
And she said, oh, that's interesting. Have you written anything? And at the time, I had completed that one first feature length version of Standing Up. So I gave her like not like a formal elevator pitch because I didn't know how to pitch at all. I still barely know how to pitch. But it was gave her the log line, something, and she was interested. She's like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. I'd like to read that someday." And I thought, "Great, sent. Ball's in your court. If I
Hmm.
never hear back about it, whatever, that's fine." But it was, just getting myself into that moment where someone would ask to read me, and to my luck, that just that luck, skill, timing, opportunity thing. The planets have to align. But she really
Hmm.
liked the script. She ended up referring me to another filmmaker who was about to make his first film as a director and who needed some work on the script. I ended up getting hired to do that. And by hired, I meant like $500 check or something like that. But it was
Hmm.
a real writing job
Hmm.
within, at this point, the first year and a half or something like that of moving to LA. And that film did actually end up getting made with my credit intact. Not the script that I wrote, but part of the deal of getting paid next to nothing was I
Hmm.
just had a guaranteed co-writer credit on it.
Hmm.
So for better or worse, my name is on it. But
And
that
that's the
same,
movie Shine. Just looking
yeah,
through your IMDb credits.
yeah, that became Shine.
Okay. Huh.
That all happened relatively quickly. That film wouldn't get made for another couple of years, but that same person, the same producer, then also like we started working together a lot. I worked on like studio films as her as an assistant. She brought me on that world with her, and also ended up producing Two Police for me when I was ready to make a real
Mhm.
attempt at a short film out here. Help me put that together.
Talk about your transition a little bit. I noticed you had two writing episodes of the TV show A Million Little Things. Talk about that transition. And also, at what point during this whole process did you start to get an agent or a manager and start to really pursue screenwriting?
Yeah. Well, I had been doing a lot on my own. So I signed with my agents at WME in 2020, and that was the first time I had been repped at all. And so that was after I'd already shot Daughter. I had a finished cut of that. It was after having Trespassers made, after having Shine, after having quite a few writing assignments on my own, just from building this little
Mm-hmm.
indie, hopping around lifestyles that I was doing. Um, I was working in production until 2015, 2016 or something like that when I sold the Trespasser script. And that was when I stopped taking production jobs and just poured everything into writing. And A Million Little Things came about actually by just, fostering relationships. Very early on, again, maybe 2014, not too long after moving here, I connected with a producer. I was an assistant for him. I did some camera up jobs for him, stuff like that. And he came out of the stand-up comedy world, like writes and produces for a lot of that on that side of stuff. And I was in his office one day, and we were kind of just kicking around ideas, not in any formal sense, but he mentioned an idea for a character he had that I thought was really, really cool. And for whatever reason, I went home that weekend and I wrote out this 15-page treatment of a short film of like what this character story could be. Brought it back to him on Monday morning, and he read it, and he's like, "Oh shit! So you can like write." And that became the start of a creative, like collaborative
Mm-hmm.
partnership. Again, not necessarily in a formal sense, but just
Mm-hmm.
like, let's keep doing this. Let's just kick some ideas around. Like, he had some pilots that he wanted to write on his own, so I helped him like develop some of his stuff. Just organizing ideas, things like that. That eventually evolved into us writing some pilots together, and that was my boot camp into TV writing. Because at the time, I was only really pursuing features, just writing and directing features. But because he asked me to write with him, I was like, oh shit, I got to go figure out how to write for TV. And that became, or out of that came a little comedy pilot we wrote together and a drama pilot we wrote together. This is maybe 2015, 2016. Like, I'm like fuzzy on the timeline at this point.
Yeah.
But we didn't really do anything with the scripts then, but we continued this, creative partnership, not to necessarily be dedicated writing partners, because we each, we do our own things, but every once in a while we'll come back and just develop some ideas together that led to selling a feature pitch together a couple years later. And so we just, we kept going down that road. And by the time 2020 rolls around, I'd finished Daughter, pandemic is in the middle, we don't know what the future's going to look like. It was him who got an invite to write on A Million Little Things, since he was already in that circle, the showrunner or something like that. He knew that I had never worked in TV before. And so he actually sent DJ Nash, the A Million Little Things creator, the script that he and I had written together, 4 or 5 years prior. And he didn't even tell me he was. He's just like, just check this script out. If you like it, I want to bring this guy with me into the room. And that's how I got on A Million Little Things.
Gotcha. I'm curious. I'd be real curious to hear your take. I see on a lot of these screenwriting bulletin boards, producers asking writers to write a treatment for free or asking them to do a spec, of things. And it sounds like you've done an enormous amount of writing for free. And that's part of sort of this baseline that you created for yourself and just fostering these relationships. What is your advice to writers that come and say, well, I want to get paid or I don't want to write for free, or this producer needs to pay me? Like, just what is your, and at some point, I mean, there is a moment where at some point in your career, you have to just say, I'm not going to take free work. But where do you land on this? And sort of what is your policy? What was your thinking at the time? And what is your thinking today?
Yeah. At the time and today's, really, it's this is an unintentional rhyme. If I'm writing for free, I'm writing for me. So in these scenarios, he's not asking me, hey, will you work on this thing? Will you write this thing? It's, hey, let's write this. This is an interesting idea. We can explore it. Maybe there's a commercial element to it. Let's just do this and we'll see what happens next. And there were several instances along the way where those types of things did come to me as jobs. Like, hey, I want you to write this script, and then I'll see about maybe trying to do something with it. Those sort of things I would never do because I don't control those. It's the work for hire minus the work aspect of it where they're actually paying you. They want your labor to then control the thing that you created and go to try to jumpstart their career with it. I'm not interested in that. Now, I think the decision of whether or not to do that should still be an individual decision. Wherever a person is in their mind, in their career, in their life, like, sure, because at the end of the day, it is all about relationships. A lot of people do get taken advantage of that way, so be careful of it. But if you're in that position and someone's like, hey, would you be interested in writing this thing, and you actually want to, and then go ahead. Why not?
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of like tempering your expectations and how you go into it. And there's been other times where I've gotten what became of a job by being willing to hear someone out who was looking for something to be written for free. So like one of the last writing assignments I had, like a legit paid assignment prior to making Daughter, was somebody who found a script of mine on the Blacklist, the public website. They reached out because they wanted somebody to do a polished pass on a feature they were trying to get made. And it was like an unpaid sort of thing. And I really liked the premise of the feature. So I was willing to, read it and meet with them and just see, like, proceed in good faith. You don't know what'll happen. And there is a version of it where the script only needed a polished pass. And for me, a polish is like, a day and a half of work. If I like what I'm sure, there's a scenario where that could have worked. This was not that. This was something that needed significantly more work. And that is when I went back to them and said, like, look, I would love to do this, but the time commitment that it's going to take is not something I can do for free. Because at the time, I'm using these types of little jobs to float myself, to pay rent. Like, I wasn't doing production work anymore. So I can't afford the time commitment it's going to take me to rewrite this script to actually turn it into something I would be proud to put in front of you with my name on it. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we're not really looking for that. So that's fine. We part ways on good terms. About a month and a half later, they come back to me and say, actually, maybe we want to take you up on that rewrite. And it became a real job at that point. You never really know.
Yeah, sound advice for sure. So let's dig into your latest film, Daughter. You've been mentioning it a couple of times here in the interview. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch or log line. What is this new film all about?
Yeah, so Daughter on the surface is about a young woman who's kidnapped into this very bizarre family to be inducted in as their surrogate daughter. And she's told as long as she plays along, she will not be harmed. But if she rebels, then she might be met with an uncertain fate.
And where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of this story?
Yeah, it was at the time, knowing that this is something that I was writing for myself to direct. So even already a little bit of a different headspace than I would otherwise be in with a script, because I'm not writing this to put in front of somebody else. I'm not writing it to sell. I'm not writing it to give someone else the power of what happens. It is, I'm writing this because I'm going to make it with whatever amount of money I can raise, whether it's 10,000, I'll make a $10,000 version of it. If it's 100,000, $100,000 version of it, like whatever,
Mm-hmm.
this film will be made. So knowing I'm going into it on a micro budget scale, I knew that meant certain creative constraints, not a lot of locations, not a lot of characters, and like start working backwards to what could be possible to do. Having worked on, that sort of budget, that the SAG ultra low budget range as a production assistant, I was so familiar with the flow of those sets and how they worked. I was like, okay, I can reverse engineer what needs to happen in a production sense to make this work. I know, 12 shooting days. I'm like somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And just as I'm approaching what kind of story I could tell, keeping that in mind that I'm not going to be writing outside of that box because, again, this is just going to go get made. And then at that point came the creative side of it. What can I do in that construct that's actually interesting or that hasn't been done a million times before? Or even if it has been done a million times before, is there anything unique that I can bring to it? Is there any unique perspective I can bring to it or unique exploration within the story? And then finally became the director hat. Well, at the end of the day, this is not, I don't need this to be a writing sample for me. What I need to do is create a landscape where I can do something visually interesting,
Mm-hmm.
experiment as a director, try to develop and find my own style in a way that I wouldn't necessarily be able to do if we had more money and somebody breathing down my neck saying, no, you got to shoot it like this. You got to get that covered. You got to do that close up.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I wanted that opportunity to just go out and take a huge swing and maybe a huge miss, but if not, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So take us through your writing process, and we can talk specifically writing Daughter, but just in general, where do you write? When do you typically write? Do you have a home office? Do you need to go to Starbucks with the ambient noise? You write it in the morning, you write at night. What does your writing schedule look like?
Yeah. So I prefer morning work. I write from home. I have a little like home office set up now. Previously, I was just in a studio apartment, and then the home office meant face my computer in a way that I can't see my bed, and that's the home office.
Yeah.
Um, but that's where I do, I think, my best work, where I can just sort of concentrate and relax and spread out a little bit. Um, to really break it down, because I used to work in tech, I developed a workflow of working from desktop computers with dual screens, so dual monitors, where I would separate, two documents on each monitor. Just as because of like what I needed to, do on the tech side
Mm-hmm.
of stuff, it just made sense to organize a workflow that way. And so when I came into this, it was picking up right from that place of organizing that workflow. So I'll have four windows open at any given moment. One of them might just be, research things I want to look up. Another one would be a general note stock that I just call my brain dump. Anything that comes to mind as it relates to this story goes into that document.
Mm-hmm.
Then I might have an outline up or a beat sheet, depending on how intricate I want to get before I go to script. And then it's the script itself. Could be open,
Mm-hmm.
at any given time, just as a way for me to easily organize information. And I think even the morning work of it all came a little bit from doing IT work, where I would show up at a really early, like 5 or 6 a.m. shift, and realize by the time I'm fully awake, half the day's over. And for whatever reason, that sort of translated into this too, where I just like to work in the morning. I like to get up, be productive, see how much I can do before even noon,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe I'm done with my writing for the day, or maybe I can move on to something else, or have to move on to something else. Um, Now that all went out the window a little bit once I started doing writers' room, because then I'm on their schedule, and anything else
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing has to fit around that time. But generally speaking, if I'm carving out a block of time for myself to sit down and write a script, it's morning work,
Mm-hmm.
my coffee, and I just kind
Mm-hmm.
of go for it.
Gotcha. What does your development process look like, especially something like that's sort of indie like Daughter? Do you have a trusted, bunch of friends that are writers, directors, producers, actors that you send the script to and get notes? And then just how do you work through that process with notes that you don't necessarily agree with, notes that you do agree with? Maybe you can talk about that just quickly.
Yeah. In general, I do have certain people that I would send a script to. If it's any feature that I'm writing for myself or professionally, I've got a friend who's on development or creative exec on the studio side, someone who is on the indie side, someone who is an actor like that, and just so different perspectives, different ideas, producers too, and just see what the feedback is. I did not do that in the case of Daughter, because in the case of Daughter, I wasn't really interested in it because it was going to be really, really out there by design and intentional by design. And it's just something I'm going in to make, not necessarily impress people with the writing of. The only people who ever saw it were people that were part of the creative team. So like the Daughter producer saw it, the Daughter cast saw it, and I got feedback from them. But it didn't really go outside the circle. Like maybe one other person, one other friend of mine read it. But it was all got pretty contained, and we were just rolling into let's do this thing. And then when it comes to the feedback, I think it really depends on you as a writer, what your intention is for the script. Because I don't think every script needs to have the same intention. If your intention is not to sell this script for somebody else to direct or whatever, you don't necessarily need to take feedback the same way that you would if that was the point. If the point of it is for you to go out and make in your backyard with your friends, then it's a different. In my opinion, it should be a different kind of mindset with it. And so, if I'm writing for, let's say it's a work for hire, it's somebody else's thing, I'm rewriting a script or whatever, and there's going to be a bunch of executives or producers that are going to weigh in, then the way I approach it is, stay true to my own creative vision, in the sense that they all trusted me with just this job in the first place. And that does mean something, even when the notes might be overwhelming, or if there's a lot of them. At the end of the day, you're here because you wrote yourself into that room. And so stick with those instincts, but in good faith, try to make whatever work. Try to make sure everybody's still on the same page about what you're doing, and give them confidence that they will be heard as a part of this process too, because they also have a stake in this. When it's a more personal thing for me, that's not really my approach. I like it. It's that.
Yeah. So, I'm curious. Okay. So once you had your script, you had it the way you liked it. What was those next steps to actually raising the money? How did you actually put the funding together for this?
Yeah. So I had started with a little bit, rolling over from a different project. So there was a different film that I thought was going to be the first film that I directed in 2018, that I had a little bit of money for, or from just like private investors that were, it's really, in this case, they were investing in me, in my ability to like go out and do this thing that I say I can do. That project didn't quite get off the ground. So I was able to roll a little bit of that into here, and then even getting some from my own family. Now, not talking huge sums of money, but just a little bit, just to piece together. Because again, if it's $10,000, that's what the budget is. At that point, knowing it was going to be a bigger collaborative thing, the strategy was internally within our team of producers, what can we go out and get and try to bring to the table? And with that came a little bit of additional equity. Even like one of the actors putting in a little bit of money, I was able to find another equity investor. And at that point, we had roughly half of what our budget ended up being in the end. The other thing that was a key part of the strategy from day one is knowing that any dollar that we got was going to go on screen. We were going to crowdfund for post-production, because I, like myself, would have been the post-production safety net. Like if I had to sit there and do all of the sound and and even VFX, whatever it was that we couldn't afford, I would have been the safety net, and I'll figure out how to do it on my own, just in Resolve, that sort of thing. I mean, I've done that. Okay. It wouldn't be green going into it, but the idea was always to crowdfund for whatever sum we felt comfortable with, which would have been a large sum because we had a huge team. And that was going to be our post budget. and in part kicking off the marketing of the film. Because we're also going into this knowing that we're taking a creative risk. We're doing something a little weird, a little different. We don't know what the response is going to be. We don't even know if it's going to be good necessarily yet. We have to pull it off first.
Mm-hmm.
But should we find ourselves in a situation where we have to self-market or self-distribute the film, a great way to do that is to have a bunch of people who've already invested in you completing it. And that is crowdfunding. And so we knew whatever we get, we're putting on screen. We're going to crowdfund for the rest, and then whatever's left, we'll see what happens. With that came the idea of scaling up a little bit by pitching to other production companies or other investors. Because when you have money raised already and you're going to go out and make your film already, that's a very different conversation that you can have with an investor or with a production company. Because you're not knocking on their door saying, please help me make a film. You're knocking on their door saying, there's a film being made, train's leaving the station, do you want to get on it? Here's our business plan. Here's the maximum that our budget will be, because we're staying under SAG ultra low. Here's the maximum our budget would be. Here's the genre. Here's what I want to do creatively, visually. Here are some comps, some other films that have been made for around this budget, bigger budget. Here's what they've made. Here's what they've not been able to do. And do these numbers make sense? Does the worst case scenario of we can barely break even over the course of 5 years because we got a self-distribute or whatever, is it a small enough ask or a small enough investment on your part to where it kind of can make sense for you? And that's a different conversation. You're presenting to them really an investment opportunity, but it's a business conversation. It's not really, do I like your script creatively? Do I blah, 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 whatever? Do I have notes? It's not even that. It's, do the numbers make sense? And in this case, for a company that we found through another producer that we brought on for the project to be the UPM, we found One World Entertainment, which is a company based out of France. They were into it. They were like, yeah, actually, we can see this working. We can see this selling internationally. It's going to be tricky because, tiny little indie film. And this was still looking at pre-COVID numbers too, because that changed a little bit. But they're like, yeah, we can do this. And they put some money in. They donated in-kind VFX services. So like part of that budget was taken out. They even brought another equity investor to the table to put some more money in. And we ended up doubling the budget. After we already had our shoot dates and most of our cast and everything was going, we know we're making the film. The budget doubled. And then at that point, we can stretch out a little bit, be a little bit more comfortable in how we do it. And then at that point, we can afford Casper Van Dien.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great story. And I hope people really listen to that. It was a lot of work and a lot of patchwork putting that together. And that's how a lot of independent films get made. We are running out of time. Just quickly, how can people see Daughter? What's the release schedule like?
Yeah, we're coming out on Friday. Depending on the city that you're in, we're going to play a couple of theaters around. We'll be here in LA. We'll be at a theater in Brooklyn, Chicago, Detroit, and Minneapolis. And the schedule should be online on our Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that. Perfect. Theaters. And then we're going to be out on pretty much every VOD service. Anywhere you would normally go to rent films or buy films, we should be out February 10th. And then we'll have DVDs coming out in the summer. We're actually getting to physical media too. So
Nice. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will put in the show notes so people can click over.
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I'm just at my name, Corey Deshon.
Okay.
Posting like some behind the scenes stuff about Daughter at the moment and
nice.
Some other cool projects I'm working on.
Perfect. Well, Corey, I really appreciate you coming on. This was a great interview. Congratulations getting this film done, and I look forward to following your career and seeing what else you do.
Cool. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Hey, thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. SYS's From Concept to Completion Screenwriting Course is now available. Just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/screenwriting course. It will take you through every part of writing a screenplay, coming up with a concept, outlining, writing the opening pages, the first act, second act, third act, and then rewriting. And then there's even a module at the end on marketing your screenplay once it's polished and ready to be sent out. We're offering this course in 2 different versions. The first version, you get the course, plus you get 3 analyses from an SYS reader. You'll get 1 analysis on your outline, and then you'll get 2 analyses on your first draft of your screenplay. This is just our introductory price. You're getting 3 full analyses, which is actually the same price as our 3-pack analysis bundle. So you're essentially getting the course for free when you buy the 3 analyses that come with it. And to be clear, you're getting our full analysis with this package. The other version doesn't have the analysis, so you'll have to find some friends or colleagues who will do the feedback portion of the course with you. I'm letting SYS Select members do this version of the course for free. So if you're a member of SYS Select, you already have access to it. You also might consider that as an option. If you join SYS Select, you will get the course as part of that membership too. A big piece of this course is accountability. Once you start the course, you'll get an email every Sunday with that week's assignment. And if you don't complete it, we'll follow up with another reminder the next week. It's easy to pause the course if you need to take some time off, but as long as you're enrolled, you'll continue to get reminders for each section until it's completed. The objective of the course is to get you through it in 6 months so that you have a completed, polished screenplay ready to be sent out. So if you have an idea for a screenplay and you're having a hard time getting it done, this course might be exactly what you need. If this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/screenwriting course. It's all one word, all lowercase. I will, of course, link to the course in the show notes, and I will put a link to the course on the homepage up in the right-hand sidebar. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer, director, producer Mark Berman, who just did a cool action thriller feature called Ambush, starring Jonathan Rhys-Meyers and Aaron Eckhart. We talk through his career. He started out just by being an on-set PA, working his way up to producing, and now he is writing and directing feature films. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's the show. Thank you for listening.